Paltrocast now with Darren Paltrowitz. Get ready to listen to your favorite artists.
Paltrocast. I'm going to say good morning. Is it good morning where you are as well?
It is. Good morning and almost early afternoon. Where are you based out of?
A couple towns over from where you grew up, Long Beach, Long Island, New York. Are you still
you're Long Beach
these days?
Hey, nice. Where are you in Long Beach?
Along the boardwalk. Now, how far removed are you from your Rockville Center roots? Because when I look you up, it talks about your Brooklyn. You are a Brooklyn artist, but of course, Long Island pride.
Yeah, that's funny because I grew up in Rockville Center. I went to high school in Rockville Center. But the second I could get into Brooklyn and Manhattan, I was just kind of there every weekend, even growing up. And most of my family is all from Brooklyn and Queens. We're the ones in Long Island. So there are strong roots there. But yeah, I think PR likes to run with Brooklyn a bit more than the Rockville Center for sure.
But when you talk about Rockville Center, okay, so Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind takes place in Rockville Center, but we know wasn't filmed there. Right. Howard Stern is still dominating Sirius XM. Amy Schumer has that new show on Hulu, which filmed in Long Beach. Max Caster is a wrestling champion who's from Rockville Center, etc. So
who's Max Caster? I got to look him up.
Long story short, I mean, Rockville Center is changing the world, but it seems like everyone wanted to distance themselves the second that they could.
Yeah, I think growing up in Long Island, you have this weird thing of living in the shadow of the city, where you're a New Yorker, but you don't have that city identity. And in a weird way, I find that Long Islanders embrace New York City more than people actually raised in New York City. Because you're just kind of always in the shadow of it. You're always in awe of it. You always go to it on the weekends, but you don't live there permanently. So it's a weird relationship Long Islanders have to the city. That's just my take. Yeah.
Well, sorry for all the Long Island talk, but you fall into one of my categories of obsession, which is that people who are from Long Island, but the Long Island music scene doesn't embrace on any level. And you're not the only person who's been associated with the Rolling Stones from Long Island that we don't think of from Long Island. And Andrew Watt would be in that category as well. Is that something you've ever spoken with Andrew Watt about?
No, I've never met him before. But yeah, it's a weird thing with Long Island. I mean, also this amazing pop artist, John Bellion, is from Long Island as well.
I didn't know he was from Long Island.
Yeah, he's from Long Island.
Because I knew that he played Jones Beach a couple of years ago, and I was going, that's a pretty big gig for a person that the everyday person doesn't know. Now that makes sense why he played Jones Beach.
Yeah, no, he's in Long Island, and it's again, it's strange because I spent so much of my childhood playing Long Island, playing rec centers and bars and VFW halls.
Totally.
And just totally being not embraced in any sort of meaningful way. So that was another reason why I kind of fled to the city and fled to other places to play shows, because I just wasn't in a hardcore or an emo band. And it was very tough to get started there, even though Long Island is the home of Billy Joel. And it's just so weird that for teenagers a couple of years ago, there was just no other type of music that was allowed.
The last thing I'll say about all that before we talk about how successful and great you are is a lot of the emo, punk, and hardcore shows that I saw as a teenager, as a college student, were in Rockville Center. They were in this downstairs basement of a venue.
Five Lounge.
Yes, before that, Backstreet Blues, 60 Below, or something like that.
I played all of them. I've played it in every carnation from I was 13 years old to 22 years old. I played them all.
There was that one, and then there was a second one on the other side of Sunrise Highway that I think was below a sushi restaurant, where I think I saw the third brand new gig. I don't know if you're allowed to say brand new anymore, that name, or we have to wait 3 more years. But again, Rockville Center changed the world, and you are one of the artists who's doing it, and you're charting all over the world, etc. So
Hey,
congrats on all of that. So what's the latest single? What's the single of the moment that we should be focusing upon? Because you've had a few of them.
it's called Eye on the Lightning, and it's at Rock Radio right now, and I'm playing it every single night on tour.
Right. And an interesting thing about your touring is sometimes you're opening for people in stadiums or arenas, and then sometimes you are a headlining artist on theater, smaller theater, huge club kind of shows. So in your case, you're very adaptable because, again, sometimes it's everyone's there to see you, and then sometimes it's a tight 30 that you got to do. Do you like that every gig is totally different?
Yeah, I kind of view them as different art forms, headlining and opening. Like I love headlining. Headlining is everything to me. And even if it's just 250 kids in a basement in Alabama, I'm gonna do 95 minutes and just give it 110% without a doubt. And then opening is different. You have different goals. You know, you're there to kind of win over a bunch of people who ordinarily have no idea who you are. So that's kind of like my shock and awe set. Like if I got 30 or 45, I am coming out so hard and it is not gonna stop until I get dragged off stage. So they're very different goals. Whereas a headline show, I view it as like a movie. You know, it's like very dynamic. I want to have a lot of different emotional beats I want to hit. You know, I want to rock hard, but I also want people to cry and I want people to laugh and have a really good time. So yeah, they're very different kind of shows with very different goals.
Well, very rarely do we see that the lead singer is also a competent guitarist, let alone someone that solos. I'm used to they give Anthony Kiedis the guitar for one song, the A chord, and that's kind of it. So was there any hesitation for you to be out front playing leads and singing? Because most people can't do that. Dave Manichetti does. Not a lot of people can.
Yeah, you know, I'm just like afforded also a certain amount of sloppiness. I'm a very sloppy guitar player. I don't think of myself as a great guitar player. You know, I just use it as like a tool of expression. When I take leads, I'm just kind of going wild and just wailing away. And I just kind of do my thing and use it as a mode of expression. If you're like a metal guy or a real technical player, I'm like your nightmare. You know, like my big inspiration is Prince, you know, and I think just to sustain one note for 20 seconds to me is like 10,000 times more thrilling than somebody arpeggiating and doing crazy scales and shredding. That's kind of like the bucket I put myself in as a guitar player.
Did you graduate to that? Because a lot of people, when they're 13 or 14, I find they learn about the concept of shredding, and then they go, it's all about the Yngwie Malmsteen sweeps and the Eddie Van Halen kind of stuff. And then they realize, oh, I can't actually play that. Then they get more into the punk rock. Was that comparable to your musical evolution?
Yeah, perhaps. I was just never good enough to do that stuff, and I had way too much ADD to learn it. Like once I got the basics of guitar playing down, I just wanted to write songs. You know, I wanted to be a songwriter. I wanted to like write songs and take people on journeys. And then I was like, oh, you know, also there'd be a great guitar solo here. Let's see what I could do. I have very limited knowledge of scales and things like that. And again, for me, the guitar is more just like a tool of expression, man. It's more like just like this vessel of which to express myself. And if you ask me what note I'm playing at any given time, I have no idea.
Wow, I'm surprised to hear about the bad attention span, given your success as an attorney. And I mentioned that because there's that short list of rockers who can also cut their own deals. It's you, it's John Levin from Dokken, very short list of people.
Well, Mick Jagger went to London School of Economics, you know? So
yeah.
Weezer, River Cuomo went to Harvard.
Dan Wilson from Semisonic went to Harvard. There's kind of that list of people who have to downplay that they know what's going on and pretend like they're just stoned like everyone else.
Knowledge is power, man. You know, it's helped me tremendously to just navigate things. So
do you still look at your own contracts at this point?
No. I don't like to look at any of that stuff. I like to stay singularly focused on making music.
That's a good answer. So what does the next 12 months or so look like for you? And the reason I ask that is sometimes artists know everything 3 years in advance. They do album cycles, but then other artists just go, oh, let's just see how this run goes and how the single goes, and we'll take it from there.
No, I'm not. Let's see how it goes and take it from there. I'm far more long-term thinking in all things Des Rocs, and as far as my career is concerned, I've got a lot of tour announcements coming very, very soon, both U.S. and international, and I'm very, very excited to announce those and get them on sale. I've also just got an absolute ton of music I've been working on, even though I've done about 100 shows in the last 10 months. Ton of music that I'm just very excited to sink my teeth into and start figuring out how to release it all.
That mix of touring that's coming up, is that a continued mix of big shows and headlining shows?
These will be all headline dates.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, we were going to be, right now I'm supposed to be on tour with Corey Taylor, but he canceled the whole tour.
Except the Philippines and Japan. I'm surprised he canceled everything but the biggest travel, the ones that require jet lag.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot of insight onto what happened there.
Right.
So I just hope he's okay. And if he can do those shows, that's amazing. That's great for him. But it actually ended up being, there ended up being a bit of a silver lining because I just have had so many ideas I want to work on. So to be home for this month, it's been really a blessing that I can just kind of get back from Europe a few days ago and just really sink my teeth into these new ideas.
It's great to see that you've been able to find success in Europe, because in looking at European tour itineraries, you'll see that usually harder artists, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, harder artists do better in UK and Germany, but not necessarily get to the Netherlands or France. It's very divided in terms of which countries you can go to when you're a rocker. The smarty pants kind of stuff might go to the Netherlands and Spain, and Italy, that kind of thing. The prog rock stuff generally goes to Greece. Or am I totally wrong and everyone loves Des Rocs everywhere?
I can't speak to other artists' experience in other countries, but man, we just did 12 shows in 14 days in Europe, and every single one was a dream come true. I mean, we sold out 98% of the whole tour and upgraded the rooms several times in a lot of these cities. Did 1,000 tickets in Amsterdam. I thought we would sell maybe 200 tickets in Amsterdam. You know, I didn't know. There's never anybody in my DM saying, "Come to the Netherlands, come to the Netherlands." You know, I don't see any sort of like groundswell over there. So I was just really blown away by the enthusiasm from every single country, and I'm excited to see what it's like in the rest of the countries that we didn't get to hit this time. You know, I'm really excited about that.
So it sounds like a have guitar, will travel scenario. You're willing to go to new markets if they're glad to have you.
Absolutely. Anybody who wants to rock out and come to Des Rocs show and have a really spiritual and intense time, like, let's do it.
Well, down to 3 softball questions here before I let you go.
Yeah.
And the first one is, what's the next territory or continent or area that you're hoping to go to that you haven't been to yet?
Definitely South America and Mexico, which is North America, but Mexico and South America, without a doubt. Really would love to go there.
Got it. Next one. What's the last concert that you went to as a fan? Not because you were opening, not because they were going to bring you on stage, but because you went, hey, I'm still a fan. I want to see this.
The Pixies and Modest Mouse at Pier 17 in New York City.
Beautiful venue, right? The best view of any concert that you'll see in this area.
Gorgeous. Yeah, I always think like it's weird that the artists don't get to see that view, you know?
That's a really good point. Even though you're elevated on that stage, you don't get to see any of it?
You don't get to see the bridge. You know, the bridge is behind you. So,
yeah. Poor guys and girls. Well, anyway, last question. You're busy rocking, as you pointed out, you know, just 100 shows here, 100 shows there, that kind of a thing. When you're not dealing with being a rock star, what's the number 2 hobby outside of all that?
Family. You know, I don't really view it as a hobby, but just spending time with family, being home, being present in New York City, walking around New York City, just being just like a regular guy walking down the street in Manhattan. You know, that's really my life, and that's kind of like the two things I ping pong between when I'm on tour versus when I'm home and just working on records and just grabbing a slice of pizza in the corner. You know, that's kind of like my existence when I'm home.
So you're not one of the secret hard rock golf people.
No, not at all.
There's a lot of them out there.
I fucking hate golf. I used to caddy in high school, and I've just never resented a group of people or sport more in my entire life. But it was the best job in the world because I could be up at 5 a.m, home at 8 a.m. with $120, go straight to Guitar Center, buy 2 pedals, and then come back home and play guitar all day. So,
was that one of the Rockville Center Country Club golf courses, or was that the Long Beach Public Course?
no, it was in it was called Seawain, and it was in Hewlett Harbor.
Oh, wow. Okay, a little bit of a commute out there to go to the 5 towns, but
I would drive out there, yeah,
I guess the work ethic has always been there for Des Rocs.
without a doubt, since day one.
Paltrocast.
Good morning to you, Chris. How's your day going, aside from talking to the fake news media?
Right. The faker the better. The real stuff is not interesting to me. The real news.
We'll keep it absolutely real here. And before we talk about music and the good stuff, we'll talk about the fact that Stereophonic is coming to Broadway. Like, how long do you have to keep that a secret for?
No longer. We did have to keep it a secret for about a month, and it was really hard. I did tell my mother, and I told my father and his girlfriend, and I told my wife, and I told my 4-year-old. Actually, I didn't tell my 4-year-old because I don't know that it would have had any impact, but he knew that I was going to be going back to work at some point on the same show. So I had him tell my dad at a Christmas Eve meal, though, so that was pretty fun.
That's got to be a challenging part of your profession where everybody thinks that you're out of work. So they feel bad for you, but they don't know that there's a great project ahead that you can't tell them.
Well, usually they're right. Usually when everybody thinks you're out of work, they're right. You're out of work. There isn't some amazing project ahead of you that you just can't tell anybody about. There's just maybe some good things behind you, and then just, the fog ahead of you, out of which will come something, whether it's, a beautiful job or just a speeding semi hitting you head on. You never know.
Yeah, and in this case, it did go from off-Broadway to Broadway, which is a very rare kind of thing. People say off-Broadway, knowing in their heads it's never going to Broadway, but the fact that they're saying the word Broadway, it lends all this credibility that shouldn't be there. You and your team actually did it.
I mean, there are a lot of things that transfer, but you're right, there are a lot of things that don't. And I think to people who like the size Broadway, off-Broadway, off-Broadway, all has to do with the size of the contract, usually the size of the house, the size of the audience. But you're right, when you talk to people who, maybe from out of town who are like, well, plays are Broadway. So when you say off-Broadway, you're basically just saying it's not Broadway, or it's not a big deal, or it's not a good thing. When in reality, most of the exciting stuff is off Broadway. And you're right, rarely does it go from off Broadway to Broadway, because sometimes they just don't translate. Like a garage band then playing like Madison Square Garden, like isn't a really healthy move, but sometimes it does. And when it does, it's really exciting. And then when we get to do a show like this one ever, it's amazing. But then when there's a response to it that is such that somebody wants to take it and show it to more people, that's really thrilling.
Well, repeating myself and rudely interrupting you for the first of many times to come here, it's that most of the times when the thing is Broadway bound, it's being showcased or shopped or done in another city. It's being done in Chicago, San Francisco. So there's not a lot of things in Broadway that were off Broadway in New York first.
True. Yeah.
So Stereophonic, looking forward to that. And you said April is when it's coming?
And beginning of April. We start rehearsals in beginning of March. And so, April 3rd is is the first preview, and then we open near the end of April sometime, and then we're, for now at least, running until the end of July. If it does really well, or maybe middle of July, and if it does really well, then we'll extend. So yeah, fingers crossed. I'm just looking at my contacts here. If there's a Stereophonic, I think it's stereophonicplay.com. You can get all the information and in terms of a link to tickets and all that sort of stuff. And right now, they're selling tickets for the first couple of weeks. There are $40 tickets, there are $80 tickets, there are $120 tickets, in addition to like the really pricey ones. So,
got it.
Is, Broadway is commercial theater, baby. So people are investing money and people want to make their money, and it's they're offering a really good deal for the first few weeks of the run. So. It's selling well. I just went on for kicks to see how it was doing, as a play that doesn't begin for 2 months. It's selling really well. So it's exciting. I think word of mouth has gotten around that it's a really kick-ass play. And I agree. I'm happy that I get to be there every night. It's
right. Cool. I'm looking forward to it. We'll put the links and all that, but let's shift. And in terms of being an interviewer or a person that does a lot of junkets, some days you have no idea who the person that you're talking about is. Yeah. And that's not the case when I spoke with you the first time. I knew who you were. I looked up the credits. That was great. But I just thought, okay, dude in a movie who's done TV work. Okay, fine, great. Right. And then we started talking, and I looked behind you, and I saw the Lemmy poster and the Van Halen poster and went, whoa. I only have 10 minutes to talk to this guy, but clearly we like the same things, but there's a publicist on the line, so we have to talk about the movie.
Right.
And here we are finally getting to talk about Van Halen.
So I think the first thing we talked about, like maybe we introduced ourselves and you're like, is that a Van Halen poster behind you? And I said, yeah. And, and then you dove into how you were writing this bio of Diamond Dave. And I was like, well, I no longer wanted to talk about the movie. I wanted to talk about Van Halen.
Yeah, I have this bad habit of shoehorning Van Halen into most of my interviews, even when they shouldn't be there.
Right.
And hey, you're talking to Ice-T. Now let's ask Ice-T about Van Halen. I have that bad habit that growing up on Howard Stern.
Is that a bad habit, though? I bet Ice-T has feelings about Van Halen. Everybody loves such a good reference. Yeah.
He did, and all these people have feelings. And the book that I started writing ultimately had nothing to do with what's happened in the Van Halen universe in the last month, where Diamond Dave is telling you his feelings. How up are you on all these Diamond Dave feelings podcasts?
I don't think I know anything about this. Is the first I've heard about any developments in the last month. Please share.
Oh, really? Okay. So I don't know if I'm going to break your heart or give you too much homework or you're going to go, Darren, you're too serious about all this stuff.
Doubtful. Okay, doubtful it's the latter.
Okay, so Dave in the last month, really the last 2 weeks, has been putting out podcasts where he's telling stories. And in the background of these stories that he's telling is like quirky music, and there's sound effects, and there's some production and all that. And the first one is basically talking about what a mess Eddie Van Halen was and why he got divorced and how he basically saved him, and how Alex was an alcoholic and a bully. And you go, what? And then the next one is about how Eddie got divorced and moved into this LA hotel called the Sportsman Lodge. Did you ever get put up there?
No.
Okay. More or less roadies stay there, adult film industry people, transient kind of people stay there. And Eddie moved in there. So it's a story about Eddie moving into the Sportsman Lodge. Then the third one was about Wolfgang being a brat, which I've debunked some of this information. And then this last one is really harsh on Wolfgang and Alex. So basically, he thinks that he's doing this jovial tone. And all the people like me and Greg Renoff and Van Halen News Desk are going, this is a bad look. What are you doing? So we've got 80 to 90% of the fan base going, this is horrifying, Dave. What are you doing? And 10 to 20% going, you sensitive snowflakes, you can't take a joke.
Right.
So none of this has come to your radar.
No, none of it's come to my radar, but now, I mean, none of it strikes me as surprising, and all of it strikes me as like, A, quite possibly, if not definitively true, and B, totally Diamond Dave's impressions and his feelings. And this from somebody who is a huge personality, has lots of opinions, is a very public persona, and, notably and historically clashed with every single one of his bandmates, like in perpetuity, like from the beginning. From before, they were playing backyard parties in Pasadena, like he was a rich kid with a big attitude and a speaker and some mics, which is why he was maybe allowed to be in the band in the first place. But like none of this stuff, I don't know, none of that seems surprising to me. None of it seems like there's no way that could be true. I'm sure everything was, lavender and lollipops all the way, and now he's just old and bitter. Like all of those guys, they did drink too much. They did have egos. They did clash, and there was a lot of conflict. I would venture to say I was a brat when I was in middle school. I bet Wolfgang Van Halen, the son of Eddie Van Halen, growing up the way that he did in Hollywood, I bet there were moments when he was a total fucking brat. Is he now? I have no idea, and I would put money on the fact that he's not. But like, especially coming from David Lee Roth, where there are times when, Eddie Van Halen, his like nemesis and his savior, and one of the most brilliant guitar players and artists of all time, where there are times when his young kid got on his nerves? Probably. I don't know. Should he be spilling any of this stuff in a podcast? Like, I'm not on any social media. I don't kind of profess that my opinions are worth the paper they're written on, or the wavelengths that they're transmitted on. So, but somebody like him clearly likes to talk, and he's got a lot of opinions and a lot of experience, and in my mind is a fucking genius, and a damaged, wounded genius. But I also think that that's redundant, that in order to be the kind of person he is, he has to have gone through a whole lot of shit, and he's probably still going through a whole lot of shit, and this is what he's putting out. And maybe it's a shame, but I don't necessarily agree or disagree with it, but none of it surprises me, and a lot of it, I would imagine, you can just run through the filter of like, this is Diamond Dave's opinion, and if you know anything about him, you know that he's got a lot of opinions and he talks a lot, And like, I would credit him for the whole, none of us would know. I will go out on the record right now as saying, none of us would know Eddie Van Halen and Alex Van Halen and Van Halen in the way that we know them now, were it not for David Lee Roth, because he's the one who
I'm with you 100%
and sold them and pushed them. It was like, I'm not playing Black Sabbath tunes anymore. I'm not playing covers. Like, yeah, we're a party band, but let's write our own music and let's play something that the girls like to dance to. And then they became bigger and more popular for other reasons besides like the coolest kids at the basement party and, Redondo. Like, who fucking cares about those guys?
Paltrocast.